Hello again, Paint Chips here. It's good to see you again. And today I'm going to be taking on a watercolor, which is a little bit different for me. And I was inspired by the artwork from Avowed. It's a new game coming out. I think I'm going to at least try it out. I don't know if I'm going to get addicted to it. So here I'm sketching out what I want to work on. This is going to be on 140 weight cold pressed paper, just made for watercolor. What it does is it handles number one, the technique, but also the material's really good. It doesn't let it spread, it holds it in place. That's what the cold press is for. If you ever use warm press, they tend to spread out a little bit more, and it takes a longer time for the paper to dry. So this is my initial sketch. I'm just going to use the original artwork because I really like how it looks. And until we get in the game and I can use like the character creator and kind of see the world, this is going to be like an inspirational piece for me. So the watercolors I'm using are just a basic set of Master's Touch. I think there's 24 colors in the set. I could be wrong. I'm just going to use all of them. I'm going to put them all on the board, or all on the palette. This is a brand new palette that I bought just for this. And the nice thing about liquid watercolor compared to the little patty sets that you buy is, well, you get to put out exactly what you use, but they turn into like the patties once they dry, and then forever you can use them as long as they're on your palette and they're nice and clean. You can continue to use them whenever necessary. You don't have to keep popping open new tubes like you do acrylics or oils or anything. So mostly today, my technique is going to be wet on dry, which is pretty much what it implies. I just use wet paint on a dry surface. You get thicker and more powerful colors. They're less translucent that way. And number one, just for this, they don't spread as much. If you do wet on wet, what that implies is you're going to wet down your canvas first, or paper, and then you're going to apply wet material on top of it, the paint, and you get some beautiful blends. And it's the best way to do like a sky or a big green grass open field in watercolor, because then you can adjust the contrast. You can put color where you want. If you want to change the color a little bit, you throw something else different in there, and they all kind of blend together. And as long as you know what you're doing, it is a beautiful way to get big open areas of your canvas covered really fast with paint. I'm not going to use that so much on this just because we have a lot of small objects to get to, so I'm going to take them little bit by little bit as they come, color by color, and making sure they don't blend into each other, muddying up the different colors that I'm trying to achieve. So the thing that really got me excited about taking on this piece in particular was just the original artwork. Not really knowing what the game is about originally, this piece of artwork really kind of pokes at your brain. It kind of makes you curious about what it's about. And it's the picture is obvious. It's like a skeleton made out of a bunch of different plants, but like, what does that mean when it comes to a video game? And so I really like the artwork because it raises a question in your head. It like almost tells a story in your mind before you really know what it's about. And so I believe Avowed is about, like, you're a magic user, a sorcerer, and you're in this like fantasy world where these people are having to deal with like a natural overtake of like a virus or an organism or a plant that's like taking over their country or the area where this takes place. And so I think the artwork just implies that beautifully. Like, I think your character uses the plants and the magic curse of the land to become more powerful and maybe fight it off. And so the imagery of like a magician using these like mystic plants and things that he puts all over his body to like modify himself to use magic. I think whoever the original artist was for this really had a sense of like what they were trying to achieve in the game. You could tell that if they weren't closely connected to the idea, they were really closely connected to how it was conveyed, and somebody really explained it to them well, because the artwork is great. So that was my inspiration for doing this. I love the artwork, and I just kind of want to explore what I could do with it in watercolors. And I don't know if I'm going to love the game. We'll see when it comes out. So like I said before, I'm using a wet on dry technique. Every time I apply one of these layers, I let the layer underneath dry completely before I start again. Sometimes I leave it just a little moist if I'm gonna just go in there to kind of push colors around. But for the most part, if I'm going to a new section, I let the old one dry before I put new color on top of it. And it's just so it doesn't blend out, so the colors stay where they are. The brushes I'm using are made for watercolors. They're a basic set. They're synthetic, but they hold a lot of liquid and they have a very sharp tip. There are a lot of watercolor brushes that they sell just specifically for watercolor, but really a sable round is the one brush you need, about of size 1. If you need one brush, that's the one brush you need. It lets you do big work, it lets you do small work, it gives you really good control over the medium. If you were to try to use just a basic synthetic like acrylic style brush or an oil paint brush, they work, but they don't distribute the fluid in the same consistent way. You can't get these nice little pockets and little bubbles of watercolor with just a normal brush. Maybe you can, but it kind of has to be the right kind of brush. And these aren't expensive brushes. Just, if you're looking for something like this, just make sure that it's made specifically for watercolor and the people that use it in the reviews, they like it. I looked around for this set for just a little bit. I think I found it on Amazon. It's fairly cheap. But the selling part of this set, it was the set of round brushes in it, because that's usually what I use for watercolors. Now that I think of it, what this art style and the look of this painting actually reminds me of is, have you ever seen Hell's Paradise? It's an anime that maybe came out a couple years ago, circa 2023. And one of the main artistic points of that anime is they create the most beautiful looking scenes of like heavenly paradise. It's supposed to be like the Japanese mentality of like, what is the most beautiful place you could see? And so it's filled with these fruit trees and beautiful flowers and tropical flowers everywhere. The variety is gorgeous. Everything you see is kind of like mystical and it all looks very pretty. But then when you start to like interact with the things that are pretty in this beautiful world, it is all absolutely brutally deadly. They're all demons and they're all alive and thinking, and they're all trying to get what they want or get a piece of the characters. And the aesthetics totally match this, where God, everything is gorgeous looking, but once you start like learning about the world a little bit, you know that like beauty represents like trying to pull you in and make you fall for something or get you close enough so they can like kill you and devour you. So I won't say that like Avowed, the game, necessarily represents that, but the artwork, the way that they can make something morbid and macabre look very beautiful. If you're into that kind of aesthetic, I definitely recommend Hell's Paradise. One thing I really enjoyed while I was working on this piece was the amount of just raw color that is in the original artwork. For the most part, I kept to the original artwork and the color. I made liberties where I needed to, but oh my god, there are so many beautiful, vibrant colors in that original piece of artwork. And I recommend, I'm not sure if I'm going to actually display that artwork just because, this is more, I don't want to display somebody else's artwork on my video. Just in respect to them. But if you go see the original piece of artwork, the cover art for Avowed, look at the absolute gorgeous, vibrant colors that are in that. They really used the palette of like the most beautiful flowers and plants that they could find, and went crazy with it. So here you see me putting a wash back into the background. I put one originally, just it was so light that by the time I got around to finishing up most of the base tones in the skeletal figure, man, there was almost nothing left in the background just because it was so light compared to what we see in the foreground. One thing that I just cheated a little bit on this one was I really needed to bring back some of them vibrant whites that I washed out originally. When you're working on watercolors, it's hard to keep the widest whites always white, because you're going to be working on things and reworking and coming to section. And most of the time, eventually everything will have some color on it. So if you really want to go back and establish those whites again, you either need to make your white out of the watercolor really opaque and lay it on a few layers, or do what I'm doing and save it to the end, kind of like a tattoo, and finish it up with your white highlights. So I'm taking my white acrylic markers, I'm taking a little white on a brush, and I'm just going back and reestablishing all those really, the whitest whites, the highlights, the really like veiny, highest of the highlights on the piece. And we just need to reestablish them again now that they've been washed out. So whenever I'm working on a piece, I always like to think, what would I do different that if I had like a second chance? Like, what would I change on this piece? And the one thing I'd have to say I'd change on this piece is how I approached the original watercolor paper. In college, I learned to like stretch it, and you have to like soak it in water, and then you staple it down to a board. And I didn't really remember that lesson when I started this, and I just taped it to one of my canvas boards. And throughout the entire process, it would warp, and then I'd have to retape it down, and then it would warp, and I'd have to retape it down. So I would say if there's anything I would change, I would soak the paper in water, I would staple it to a wooden frame board, like for watercolor, and then I would let it stretch, and then when it gets really nice and taut like a drum, then I would paint it. So I would say just a little extra preparation, and that would be really the only difference. I really like how it turned out, like in a whole. So what are your expectations for this game? Being that it's an Obsidian game, it's kind of high. I like the Outer Worlds, and the way they tell a story is great. But I feel like it's getting a little bit of bad press, and it's not good to judge something until you actually play it. So what do you guys think? So I did this piece to get out of my comfort zone and get back into watercolors, and I'm loving it. So what's next? Should I do some Ghibli, some Gundam, maybe Atomfall? It's looking fun. Let me know in the comments what you think, and thanks for watching.